Mine's now off, so if that's the problem, it's off. So, Greg Shepard as Teddy Roosevelt.
Hello, I'm Teddy Roosevelt. I can't wait to tell you about my wonderful life that was full of adventure, charisma, and excessive energy. In my lifetime, I was a husband, a father, I was a rancher, a cowboy, an author, a leader, a statesman, a war hero, a policeman, an author, a hunter, a hiker, and I was even a diplomat, and I was even a taxidermist, and everything I did, I took head on at full speed. Being your 26th president, I passed laws that you still live with today. I was born October 27, 1858 in New York City. My address was 6 West 57th Street. My mom was socialite Martha Bullock, actually Martha Stewart Bullock. She was a socialite. And my dad was Theodore Roosevelt Sr. He was a noted philanthropist, helped found the Museum of Modern Art, a Museum of Metropolitan Art in New York, helped muster troops for the Union Army in the Civil War, and was a Republican Party member. I was second oldest of 4 children. Here we are looking older. I had an older sister named Anna, or Bammy, a younger sister, Corinne, and a younger brother, Elliot, and here I am. However, when I was younger, I looked like this at age 18 months, and this at age 4 years old. And here I am ready to go on my first big game hunt. Of course, my dad gave me this gun, so I called it a pop gun. And when I was young, I was called T.D. and suffered from debilitating asthma. However, I was always curious, and at age 6, out my grandfather's window, I saw Lincoln's funeral procession with my friend Edith Carroll, who would later become my second wife. By age 7, I developed an interest in natural sciences and learned how to stuff and mount small animals. I even obtained the head of a dead seal, and with a few cousins of mine, we made the Roosevelt Museum of Natural History. When I was a teenager, I knew I had to strengthen myself, so I became a fitness advocate. I took up running, weightlifting, gymnastics, later on boxing and judo, to lead what I call the strenuous life, that is putting excessive zeal and enthusiasm into every single thing I did. At age 18, in 1876, I went to Harvard. There, I was editor of the Harvard Associate, was involved in 2 fraternities, and on the rowing team, and there I met my future wife, Alice Hathaway Lee of Massachusetts. She was a frozen fire, my one desire. And I really had a hankering for her, and if any man made a pass at her, I'd challenge them to a duel. When I was a sophomore, my dad died and left me $125,000 as inheritance, which is $4 million in today's money. I could easily have a life of leisure, but chose a more challenging path. In 1880, I graduated from Harvard, magna cum laude, 14th in my class out of 120, went to Europe, hiked the Matterhorn Mountain, came back, married Alice, and then went to Columbia Law School, where I wrote my first book called The Naval War of 1812. Actually, I write 37 other books in my lifetime, like History of the United States, right here. Dedicated this to my mom and dad. Other books like Hunting Trips of a Ranchman and Winning of the West, 4 volumes. These books are about history and outdoor testosterone-related adventures. The income from writing these books surpassed my public servant salaries. I had a photographic memory. I was able to speed read, read a new book every day, and I was able to write 100,000 letters in my lifetime, and to fuel all this, I drank a gallon of coffee a day. In 1882, I dropped out of law school and ran against a Republican incumbent in the New York State Assembly or Legislature, and I won. I wanted to be, I was the youngest serving, and I wanted to be part of the governing class. And I wanted to clean up a system that was ripe with bribery and shady deals. So here I am proposing reform legislation and working with Governor Cleveland. This bill right here, well, that's about getting rid of the stopping the manufacturing of cigars in tenement houses. I almost got a corrupt judge impeached. I became a do-gooder going after the big cats who thought they can get away with it, and this would be a lifelong obsession with me. And I became House Minority Leader. However, I had the worst day of my life in February 14th of 1884. My mom, Minnie, died of typhoid fever at age 50. And 11 hours later, in the same house, my wife, Alice, died. She passed on, and she just gave given birth to our beautiful baby daughter named Alice, and had Bright's kidney complications from Bright's disease. I was devastated. To be honest, I wrote in my diary, the light had gone out of my life. I did not know how to cope. So I decided to give my baby daughter to Bammy and move out to the North Dakota Badlands. There, I bought a ranch for $14,000 and became a rancher. I rounded up cattle, became a cowboy, rode horses, had a pearl-handled gun, and like a rhinestone cowboy. And here I am, led the frontier life, living in this log cabin. I had buckskin clothes, a knife, and spurs. And I even became a frontier sheriff. One time, a group of men stole a boat, and took it downriver. I chased after them, caught them, and made them walk back barefooted. Actually, I had to give up the ranch because of droughts and overgrazing. So I came back to New York City and took custody of my daughter and built my estate called Sagamore Hill at Oyster Bay, Long Island. It was a 22-room house with indoor plumbing. And let me take you inside because it was the definition of a man cave. Here's my library. I'm always surrounded by books, a picture of my dad, U.S. presidents, and again, my living room. And then I got deeply involved in politics. In 1885, I was commissioned to be police commissioner of New York City, appointed that way. And I wanted to reform a system that was corrupt and inept. So I became the city's top cop. In doing that, I wanted to reform the system because I saw a lot of problems, like protection money paid by prostitutes and saloon keepers to patrolmen in the inner city. I established a bicycle squad and went on midnight walks with my investigative reporter friend Jacob Reese to see if policemen were sleeping on the job. I also shut down the saloons on Sundays. And this was unpopular because Sundays were the only day that men could socialize with other men. So, why would I do that for? Because my brother Elliot, well, he was a severe alcoholic in his 20s in the 1880s. And he had to be institutionalized, was sent to an asylum, actually jumped out of a window, and then the next day died from that fall. So that's why I shut him down. However, even though they were unpopular, I ran for mayor the next year and lost because of these laws. But the same year, I married my childhood friend, Edith Carroll. And together, we would have 5 children. That is Teddy Jr., Archie, Kermit, Quentin, and Ethel. And then in 1889, Benjamin Harrison, when I just turned 30 years old, Benjamin Harrison appointed me on the U.S. Civil Service Commission because of my party loyalty and stellar reform ideas. And I wanted to take on the spoil system or the patronage system. That is how federal employees were hired, promoted, and fired based on who they knew and who they voted for. And I went right to work. I arrested Baltimore postal employees for trying to buy votes. I took care of these test examination people They wanted to sell test answers for $50 and got knee-deep in the muck by investigating dozens of fraud and abuse cases. This was so prevalent in our day that one of our presidents, Garfield, was assassinated over a patronage job. So I did this for 7 years in my 30s. In my later 30s, I resigned from this job to become Assistant Secretary of the Navy. I helped modernize the fleet. Here I am. And I didn't do this for too long because in the summer of 1898, I resigned from this job just before I turned 40 because I wanted to lead an all-volunteer cavalry unit in the Spanish-American War. See, the United States was fighting Spain over its colonial policies in Cuba. So that summer, I gathered up a ragtag team of ex-miners, ranch hands, cowpokes, ex-cops, anybody who could ride a horse, and as their colonel trained them, and we became known as the Rough Riders. And we weren't too pretty, but we were proud. And we set sail for Cuba to confront the Spanish. And here I am with my drinking buddies. And we saw our first action that year in July 1st, where with all of us on horseback, and me in the lead, we all charged up Kettle Hill, and were able to take that hill and secure it. Then, at full gallop, we raced across the valley to San Juan Ridge, the highest point being San Juan Hill, and under withering enemy fire, we were able to take that hill and wait for reinforcements to come to secure it. I was wounded by shrapnel in this battle and nominated for a Medal of Honor, but didn't receive it till 103 years later. Anyways, the United States won the war against Spain, and this did two things. This made the United States a world power and ignited my political career. Because when I came back home to New York, I was going to capitalize on my being a war hero. So I ran for governor of New York in that summer, and in the fall, I won by 20,000 votes. And is my way. I wanted to tax big businesses and state-created franchises. Well, the Republican establishment didn't like that. They considered me a pain in the butt. They didn't like me at all, and I was a liability to them like a thorn bush in a whirlwind. So, so they decided to get rid of me, and their best way to do that was to put me on the ticket with McKinley in the 1900 general election as McKinley's running mate or as VP. That way I'd have a do-nothing job and business as usual could go on in the state. Well, I took the bait. That summer of 00, I went on an extensive train tour, traveling 21,000 miles by train, going to 24 different states, making speeches on the back of trains, or what they call whistle-stop tours. And I would speak to small towns, to large towns, but always to large crowds. And it is my personal way of speaking. I'd be emphatic. I'd slam my fist against my palm to make a point. I'd be hard-nosed, high-strung, over-emotional, and emphatic about everything. And all this seemed to work, because in the fall of 1900, we won. The red states here with us. We had 292 electoral votes. The other side, by William Jennings Bryan, just had 155 electoral votes. And a little bit of thing about him, he ran for president 3 times, Bryan. A couple of years before this election, he made his Cross of Gold speech, which about the gold standard that America, he wanted America to be on. This was translated into a book, a fictional one by Lyman Frank Baum, called The Wizard of Oz. Oz meaning OZ, meaning ounces, and the Yellow Brick Road meaning bricks of gold. So anyways, that was his contribution. Of course, I beat the pants off of him. He was later involved, by the way, in the Scopes trial. And I was inaugurated vice president in March of 1901. However, 6 months later, that same year, our president, William McKinley, was shot and killed by an anarchist at a meet and greet event in Buffalo. I was out here hiking in the Adirondacks Mountains when I learned of this, and was then whisked away to Buffalo, according to the sign, by horse, by train, any which way to get me to the Wilcox Mansion in Buffalo, where in the library there, in front of 40 witnesses, I was sworn in as President of the United States. I became an accidental president and the youngest to serve at age 42. And of course, with this position, I had clout and I decided to use it right away and became a trust buster and a muckraker, a term I coined. So, welcome to the progressive movement. And that is with other like-minded citizens, concerned civic leaders, politicians, and even newspaper reporters, we would rake in the muck to make a better, less exploitive America. At this point, the United States was taking in an influx of tens of thousands of immigrants a year, mainly to large cities. So there were issues and problems with overcrowded tenement housing, with sanitation, with infectious diseases, child labor, and just crowding in general. So we had to pass laws. My administration from 1901 to 1909 filed suit against 42 corporations that were holding companies or trusts, monopolies or conglomerates that had a stranglehold on small businesses. So we used the Sherman antitrust law to break them up, and here I am doing this and jiu-jitsuing them right there. And particularly in what areas? Mainly in the oil industries and in the railroad industries or transportation. This lady, Ida Tarbell, she wrote a book about the history of Standard Oil Company that exposed the corrupt policies of, exploitive policies of John D. Rockefeller. Her father was ruined by him, so she decided to get even and write an expose about him. That's the muckraking investigative reporting that was started back then. It's still going on today. So we had to pass laws with that, and specifically with the railroad companies, we passed laws like the Elkins Act, which stopped the abuse of rebates. This made Rockefeller super rich and became my arch nemesis. And the Hepburn Act, which said that there were good and bad trusts, and that we would stop the rate increases as it went along. And also we established the Interstate Commerce Commission, which checked out any malfeasance. Now, on a lighter note, I was out hunting and refused to shoot a small bear. And a local toy maker got an idea and created the teddy bear. And I also created the teddy, which is women's lingerie. And whenever Edith put these things on, I would say, bully, bully, let's increase our family size. Okay, in 1903, 1904, we created the Panama Canal. Actually, we annexed part of the country of Panama to create a 50-mile shortcut between the two oceans. Actually, this was a horrendous job. It took 56,000 employees 10 years to make this canal, cost hundreds of millions to make it. We imported tens of thousands of people from across the seas, overseas labor to handle this. 10% of those workers, over 5,000 of them, died from malaria alone. Now, I went there and operated a steam shovel. I was the first president ever to leave office while in office, never to leave the country while in office. And here I am explaining things about the Panama Canal. Now, taking the canal is part of a larger picture that I had, actually an international policy called the Big Stick Policy. That is, speak softly and carry a big stick. And there's no model coddling with me. That's a phrase I coined, which means to make physically and morally soft, not under my watch. Which means that this became a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which meant that the United States had a right to intervene in any country's foreign affairs, particularly in the Caribbean area and the South American area, in case they had aggressive foreign invasions or had debt problems. So the United States would help restore democracy in these areas. Later, this would pertain to the whole world, and thus the United States became the policeman of the world, or the protector of the world. And you would see this in your generation with conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. That's the big stick policy that we still use today. And of course, in 1904, I won with Fairbanks, and on my own I won. And I continued my progressive movement idea because a book came out called The Jungle in 1905, by Sinclair, that exposed the dangers and the awful conditions of the meatpacking industry. The conditions were filthy, so we decided to do something about it. It's one thing to complain, another thing to do, and we made the Meat Inspection Act of 1906, which meant that only healthy cattle and ones that were inspected could then be slaughtered. We also made sure that the labels could be put on cans. And I knew about this in person because my Rough Riders had a problem with some of the meat in the cans when we went out to Cuba. First-hand experience. And we also created the Pure Food and Drug Act of '06, which meant that only licensed doctors could dole out prescriptions, and that any habit-forming drugs had to have labels on them. We told Coca-Cola to get rid of its cocaine in its product, and my sister Corinne had got involved. She was in this. She took some snake oil from one of these snake oil salesmen and got sick because of it. And speaking of the Wizard of Oz, remember that wizard operated out of a little, like a wooden wagon? Thank you. And that's what he was doing, selling this, and we had to stop this. All this later would turn into the FDA, so it still exists today. Now, at this point, I was at the zenith of my career. I was an apex political predator, and this was my Camelot. So, in 1906, we created the Antiquities Act, which preserved millions of acres of land to be protected. So, we established 20 irrigation projects, 51 bird preserves, 150 national forests, 18 national landmarks, and 5 national parks. Here I am with John Muir at Yosemite, and here I am again with John Muir. This is all because I love to be outside. Now, the Republican Party, or the Party of Lincoln, used to have all these liberal reform ideas, but this all changed in the 1920s with 3 Republican administrations, and the Democrats flipped to be the liberals and the Republicans the conservatives. Most historians agree that I was one of the 10 most influential presidents. And that is, I could easily tell you though, but we got our programs passed with compromise and reaching across the aisle. But only a lame bureaucrat would talk that way. I have the other side over for lunches and dinners. And during small talk, to my great amazement, and to my surprise, I found out I had more in common with them than originally thought. Why, one senator liked to hike like I did. The House Minority Leader, his parents went to this, his parents knew my parents knew real well, and the House Minority Whip, his kid went to the same school my kid went to. And then I'd sit down with them and I'd say, well, if you vote my way, what can I do for you? And most often they would want a bridge, a road, a military base, and this is called the art of the deal. On a personal note, all through my life I had to deal with an ugly monster called bipolar depression, which my dad had and my son Kermit had. And which meant real high highs and real low lows. Well, the lows turned into a depression that would lay me to waste, make me mope around, and be a nothing. Well, I didn't want to be a nothing. I wanted to be a somebody. I didn't want to make a difference. I wanted to be the difference. So, in order to do this, I had infused in myself tremendous amounts of energy. Mark Twain, who once met me, called me a tornado. I had to go to war with myself to make this work out. I'm sorry. This is, that's how I got around it. So whenever I had to deal with it this way. And doing this, I became the iconic alpha male, which is large and in charge. And with me, it's either lead, follow, or get out of the way. About my personal life, my eldest daughter was a real pistol. I couldn't call her by her first name because it reminded me of my first wife. So, I had a problem because I couldn't be president and control her at the same time. I called her Miss Lee. She would go on the White House roof and smoke cigarettes. She'd carry a snake in her purse and sometimes wear it around her neck. She would swear at dignitaries and had an affair with a senator. My oldest son, Teddy Jr., he was gassed in World War I and became a general, landed on the Normandy beaches, and died 5 weeks later from a heart attack after the invasion in his 50s. My other son, Archie, was wounded in both wars and became a successful businessman. All this time, the White House became a zoo with all these animals that I had because I liked them around. And my son, Kermit, committed suicide in '42. My youngest daughter, Ethel, married a surgeon and became a Red Cross volunteer for decades and helped make Sagamore Hill into a national landmark or into a special place. And my youngest son, Quentin, shown here, and this one's hard to talk about, who as a kid threw snowballs at Secret Service men and made a baseball diamond on the White House lawn, was shot down by enemy aircraft in World War I and was KIA while I was still alive. So it still hurts talking about it. My wife, Edith, ran our household, and my nephew, Eleanor, that is my brother's, Elliot's daughter, married my fifth cousin, FDR, and so it was all in the family. And of course, speaking of family, we all had a facial hair problem with excess facial hair. Boy, did we go through the razors. Okay, so in my lifetime, I was a governor. I wore a lot of hats. A vice president, president. We'll talk about peacemaker and mighty hunter. And my character, me, they based a character on me called Batman. Why? Because I came from wealth, had power, and decided to use it to fight corruption. And just like Batman, I wanted to do these things to preserve the world, to make it better for democracy. In a world that kept pushing me around, and I'll stand my ground, and I won't back down. That's the way I felt about it. So how did I become a peacemaker? Japan and Russia were about to go to war. I stepped in and created make them have peace, and created the Treaty of Portsmouth. By doing that, I won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm the only person to win the Nobel Peace Prize and the Congressional Medal of Honor. 1909, I left office. I'll tell you why. I didn't run for re-election. In '09, I could have. But I decided not to on the election of 1908 because I got tired of sitting behind the desk. I wanted to go outside and play, just like all you guys wanted to play. So I went on an expedition sponsored by the Smithsonian. It was a 10-month expedition right in the heart of Africa, in the African Rift Valley. We went hundreds of miles. The purpose of it was to collect specimens. I took Kermit along, and we took 4,000 pounds of salt to preserve specimens, and we took 250 guides, porters, and hunters. Here were some of the luggage, actually the crates that we had to support all this. And we collected over that time 11,000 specimens. It took the Smithsonian 8 years to catalog all these things, everything from insects to elephants. And of course, I took my taxidermy kit along, and I know that you guys take this along on your vacations because you never know what might happen to your spouse. So, Kermit and I shot over 500 big game animals. That water buffalo I shot is still in the Field Museum in Chicago. 15 million people have seen it over time for education. And here I am again with our trophies. And here I am again. And we're spending 10 months there. And this is when I bagged my Triceratops. And all this time, since I had time off, I decided to write. Well, I wrote books, magazine articles, spent time with my family, but to tell you the truth, all this time I was upset because my hand-picked successor, Taft, was a real wimp. I accused him of mollycoddling around, not using the bully pulpit, not being progressive, and doing things that I really didn't like that much. So I decided to do something about it and ran for office myself with the Bull Moose Party. It was a third-party ticket, it was independent. And I decided to go off on my own on this. And I called it that because, thank you, I was strong as a bull moose and I wanted to do this. Here I am. And of course we had a liberal platform. We had banking reforms, a welfare for the needy, as well as women's suffrage. But women wouldn't get the right to vote till 1920, which is an outrage. So, here I am out on the campaign trail in 1912 out in Milwaukee, making one of my famous emphatic speeches. As you can see, I'm really into it. And then a tavern owner named John Schrank shot me. The bullet went right through my speech papers. The bullet went right through my eyeglass case, went through my shirt and into my chest. And then, in true Colonel Roosevelt style, I said, I took my handkerchief out of my mouth, out of my pocket, grabbed my mouth, see if I was bleeding. Of course it wasn't. And then I said, it takes a lot more than that to kill a bull moose. And I went on with my speech for another hour. Because no one stops me from making a point, and I always have something to say at the end. So, of course, I was taken to a hospital afterwards and examined, and even the newspapers, I got hold of this, from this attempted assassination, and they said I went to a hospital, and the bullet lodged right in my middle rib area. Actually, they never took it out because it really didn't bother me, and I would hold it inside of me for all my life, the rest of my life. Now, this made then Secret Service people to be able to protect all presidential candidates. This actually happened with one of your other presidents. His name on the $20 bill was Andy Jackson. He was involved in a duel. And a man had insulted his wife, Rachel. So they had a duel. The man who shot him shot first, and the bullet went right in Jackson's chest and then stayed there all his life. And when Jackson's turn to shoot, he just lowered his pistol down 2 feet. So that's how that works. In the election of 1912, I had 88 electoral votes in the green. Taft, that wimp, had just 8 votes, electoral college votes. And Wilson won with about 350 of them. And so a Democrat was in office then for the next 8 years. But we had a good try at it. And in 1914, I had a chance to speak in Argentina, and then had a chance to go on a 33-day excursion down the River of Doubt, which is a tributary to the mighty Amazon. 20 of us were to go in canoes, and we would explore the area, map it, take a few specimens. I took Kermit along with me. This was my last chance to be a boy again, and I really bit off more than I could chew, because on this trip we were attacked by angry natives, mosquitoes, piranhas, snakes. We had to deal with treacherous rapids, whirlpools, giant waterfalls. We had to portage our canoe quite often. My leg got hurt with this boat that got stuck between rocks, and I ended up getting jungle fever or malaria, and became delirious and wanted to remain in the jungle and be left to die. But I did not die from this. Rather, we just had a disaster of a trip. And from this trip, I had lung and leg infections for the rest of my life because of it. However, Kermit and I, after this trip, wanted to do one last expedition, one last place to explore, and it was a place not too far from here. But we had to cancel because at this place there was just no life on it past 8:30 at night. So 1916, I was asked to run for the Blue Moose Party. I declined. 1918, I asked Wilson if I could lead a cavalry unit in World War I. Declined. There are many things named after me: a dam in Phoenix, a national park in the Dakotas, gorgeous views, an island in the Potomac with a statue, some other things, and of course, emboldened in stone at Mount Rushmore. I died in January of 1919 from a coronary embolism. I was 60 years old. A blood clot let loose and traveled to my lungs. Best summed up then by Vice President Marshall, who said, death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, because if he would have been awake, there would have been a fight. And you're darn right there would have been a fight. And you still see me. I don't care if I die, in a way, because my spirit is still with you. And it is still there. It's in the shadows. Whenever you see the government in today's world having press conferences about and going after corporations that screw Americans around, like Microsoft, Facebook, or Google, I'm right there in the background. I'm also right there in the background when congressmen, congresswomen, senators, state legislators, and governors make laws protecting consumers so you guys can have a better life and be able to retire out here. You also see me with idealistic DAs, district attorneys, that want to make the world a better place by going after the ones that really take advantage of other people and do things illegally. And lastly, you'll see me with environmental activists who are tired of waiting for the world to change and want to do something about it today. So you'll see me there and tired of statistics and graphs and all kinds of lectures saying that we are not responsible for climate change, etc., and we are. It's time for a change. You will see me there. So yes, I had a terrific life. I believed I helped America become that shining bright city upon a hill, a beacon of hope and democracy. Thank you.